faces. Right now. You have 3 seconds before I post you guys all absent. 3, 2, 1. Okay. During the entire class period, I expect you to have your camera on. There's no reason for you to not have your camera on. Okay? So don't like undo your camera. You wanna whatever. Just have it on. Remember that what you have today is going to be on your test tomorrow, or at least parts of it. So make sure you are, if your person doesn't need to write notes, then you don't have to write notes. I'm not going to make you write notes, but if your person does, make sure you have been, because otherwise it's just going to not work out for you as you get to. So make sure you have that. I see that it is here, so I am going to start with us. Here we go. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Oh wait, screen. Soup. Okay. I'll present now. So, as we're going, I have 3 pieces of music that I really want us to say, because they have 3 very famous conductors that I'm going to have share your screen. Yes. Okay. Slideshow. From the beginning. Can you see my slideshow? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Here we go. Classical music. Classical music has been, from the years are kind of a little iffy. Some historians say it's from 1730 to 1820. Some of them say from 1730 to 1830. Some say from 1750 to 1830. It's kind of, these time periods are not exact. They're dealing with when composers were writing that fit the genre, and so you can kind of it's not exact. Anywho, what was happening in our world? Our world being the colonized United States, because just to give you an example, all of the things that were happening that you see here, American Revolution, the Constitution, George Washington, Louisiana Purchase, the Star-Spangled Banner, like all those things, none of it had anything to do with what was going on in Europe during the time. In Europe during this time, people started to have money. They started to go to concerts because they wanted to just hear good music. They had the opportunity to. However, like in the 13 colonized states, people were living in the country. They had their own music. It was not at all classical or anything like that. And they just didn't have time to do anything because they were sitting there, worrying about colonizing their new world. So just to show you during this time period what was happening, it's right there. Okay. Main characteristics of the time period. Classical music was lighter. So Baroque music, if you remember, was heavy. Heavy. They had polyphony. So polyphonic music meant that there were 2 melodies going on. It didn't really, it was super boisterous. It had tons of ornamentation. Remember how when I went through and I said, let's look at the art was also very busy. It was very intense. And that is different than the classical era. The classical era music was homophonic, which means it had one melody and then it had chordal progressions, things that totally related to the music above. And it wasn't 2 melodies fighting each other, which is essentially what the Baroque time was. The orchestra was like really invented. The big, pompous, huge orchestra that we are used to with the 40 to 60 members, that was made and amplified and made its real debut in that time period. And the harpsichord was no more. It became the piano that we know, also known as forte piano. And the fun fact about that is that, in addition, oh, let me see. Do I talk about this in the future? Well, let me see what happens just to make sure I don't want to. Okay. So, in the classical music period, I'm going to actually write down what I was thinking of before, just in case it doesn't come up. And it was dealing with, oh yeah, piano. Okay, just in case, because I really want to make sure I tell you that. Okay. The classical music period had a theme. So as you can see in this example here, you have the melody, da 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 da, that melody, and on the bottom it goes da 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 da. Like the melody was what people were listening to. The bass, or it was no longer a counter melody. It was just chord structure that helped support the melody. This was the biggest characteristic of the classical period. So let's see. It says classical period phrases, contrasting figures and rhythms, and there's that. Okay, the texture was mainly homophonic. So again, homophonic is going to be, it has the top is the melody, okay, and the bottom is just chordal structure that helps support the melody. Whereas before, you would have a melody on the top and a melody on the bottom, and they were essentially like fighting each other. It's a little bit different. So, and then you can see Alberti bass, broken chords like this. Okay, all right. So the classical style draws on style galant, which is a lightness that classical music brought. So where Baroque was heavy and ornamental, classical was light. And now it doesn't mean it was always light, okay? Because if you hear the most famous piece of classical music that anyone on the planet knows, dun 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 dun, right? Like anyone on the face of the planet has heard that and knows what that is. And if you hear that, you don't think, oh, that's light. Like, no, it's obviously heavy. But in general, it was a much lighter sound, and it actually bridged the gap from Baroque, which was really heavy and ornamental, to Romantic, which was very, I mean, the name in and of itself sounds soft, right? So classical was the in between. So here we are going to talk a little bit. So I'll say this. So dynamics in the Baroque period, they did not give you anything other than instrumentation and notes. And they being composers, expected the performers to kind of, decide how they wanted to play it, if they wanted to articulate, etc. In the classical time period, there was composers took complete authority on their compositions. So, like we see today, dynamics were inserted, articulations were inserted, crescendos, decrescendos, all the things, because essentially giving the composer the ability to actually produce something that they hear in their head and have a performer play it exactly as they hear it, which wasn't the case during the Baroque period. So that is a huge, major difference. This is where we really start to see classical music as we know, as we play today. So all right, and then keyboard instruments. So another thing about that is that the piano was really invented, and it had a much richer sound than the harpsichord. If you remember, the harpsichord is a combination between a piano and an acoustic guitar. So the real piano that we have has it's velvety and has like a lot of thickness to it, and that was really brought about during this time period. Opera comique. So, like I said, last class, during the Baroque time period, they really wanted to keep opera as drama, right? Opera was really based on Greek drama. As it continued to develop into the classical period, they had opera, which was drama and Greek drama based, and then they had opera comique, which was obviously comic opera and brought out a lightness and a happiness and a comedic style that was totally different. And the really the wait, are we're gonna talk about it? Yeah. Okay. So we just continued to have music for solo singers, for whole orchestras and operas. So, all right, here we have sonata. Now, a sonata, I'm not going to go to where it's go. Well, let me see. If I go there, what's it gonna do? Because so a sonata is a form in addition to a type of. Oh no, this is for when I did it myself. All right. So here's the main thing about sonata. Sonata is ABA. Okay, so sonata form is what many symphonies started as. So you have the sonata form at the very beginning. So you have, let's say, for example, you have a the theme starts da 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 A da 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 B da 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 A. Right? Can you hear that? Do you understand what I mean by A, B, A? So you have the a theme happen, whatever it is, then you have a variant of that theme, and then a repetition, a repeat of that theme. So A, B, A. And you're going to see that in symphonies. If you actually listen and pay attention to symphonies, you're going to start, not all of them again, but you're going to start with the sonata form as the first movement, and then it continues on. And everything recapitulates from the sonata form throughout the symphony. And if you actually take time to listen to a full symphony, I'm talking about listening to the whole 45 to an hour of a symphony. It's usually done in 3 to 4 movements, and you can really hear the recapitulation of themes coming through and expanding, and it's pretty awesome. Okay. Trios and quartets. So we just during this time period were able to really start to grow and become chamber music became very, very, very important, and it became a part of what the wealthy class brought. So they would hire trios and quartets to come to their parties or their balls, and they would play music for them. And the trio always was the same structure. So it was violin, viola, cello, violin, viola, bass, or a quartet being violin, viola, cello, bass, or double violins and cello, bass. But it was always in that that same exact structure. The symphony, like I said a couple minutes ago, the symphony was expanded upon. It was made much bigger, much. It grew in not only its size but in the number of performances that they did and what they were able to perform. And people actually started to go to halls, like big giant halls, to listen to music, which was not typical of any of the periods before then. Okay, so people would go to opera halls to listen to operas during the Baroque period, but they wouldn't go to an opera hall to listen to to instrumental music. This is something that was really revolutionized the classical music that we know and started during the classical time period. Concerto, like concerti, which was in the Baroque period, concerto had a solo instrument accompanied by an orchestra. And then you had serenades and divertimentos. Okay, so sonata form became the most important. Everything I just said. So there you go. All right, ABA, that's important for sonata form. Okay. The first Viennese school. So the first Viennese school is a term that is used to describe the composers of the classical period. And it was three composers that were the main composers of the classical period, two of which are, if you were to talk to a 5-year-old and say, tell me the name of a composer, they're going to say one of the two names that are part of the Viennese school. So Haydn, Joseph Haydn, was the first one. He's the least or the lesser known if you're not a classical enthusiast, a classical music enthusiast. But he was like the first one. Then you had Mozart, and then you have Beethoven. Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven all talked and were a part of each other's like posse. I can't think of, like, if I have friends and we go and talk to other friends, that's part of our, like, there's a word I'm thinking of and it's not coming. Anywho,
Squad.
the what?
Your squad?
No, I like that word though. Anyway, so a couple more things before we go on to the actual composers of the Viennese school. The classical music really spanned the 18th century, so it really started to, and this is where the time periods get smaller and smaller and smaller, right? So if we remember, medieval time was 1,000 years, then we have 300 years, then we have 200, now we're at 100. Depending, it might even only be 80 years, depending on which historian you want to follow. But it does span the 18th century. And the very important thing for us to remember again is that it goes, the classical music period is the bridge between the Baroque period, which was very heavy, ornamental, and serious, to the Romantic period, which was dramatic and had awe-inspiring melodies. It was very beautiful. It was the bridge between those two. So it was a combination of the two of them. And so the first Viennese school, which again is not an actual school, okay, it is a group of people. These people work together to establish and refine classical music as we know it today. Okay, so and as you can see here, so Haydn and Mozart were chamber music partners, so they would play music together. Mozart and Beethoven were contemporaries. Mozart would have been Beethoven's teacher, and there are some, like, rumors out there that Beethoven even went and took a couple of lessons with Mozart. How much of these things are true, I don't really know. Okay, quick comparisons about the two. So 1756 to 1791, Mozart was born in Austria. If you can do math really quickly in your head, you can see that the guy died at 35 years old. So think about the number of pieces of music that he has composed in 35 years. So just think about that. It's incredible. It's incredible. Okay, so comparisons. And then Beethoven, which I'll just quickly tell you, he was born in Germany. So Austria, Mozart, Germany, Beethoven. He died at age 56, so he did live a little bit longer. And they both had very strict and demanding parents. Mozart's family was made him travel and perform. He had been performing since he started composing at 5 years old. Okay, Mozart did. And he was taken around by his father to a whole bunch of different courtly families and things like that, and made to perform, and kind of had a really, he's what you would consider a childhood actor of today. Beethoven, his father, was very, very, very mean and made him, and this sounds stupid, but just would make him practice hours on end, in a very not nice way. Anywho, so Mozart, happy and cheerful, not good with money. He was very neat in his writing. If you look up an actual composition, like an original composition, it's very, very neat. He had written 40 symphonies by 30, and Beethoven had just done his first symphony by 30. So you can kind of see the how prolific Mozart was in his short 35-year lifespan, as opposed to Beethoven. Beethoven was a curmudgeon, and he was angry and didn't have wife or kids. And Mozart had a wife and family, but died under mysterious circumstances, was buried in an unmarked grave. Very, very, very sad. Obviously, you can see Beethoven was followed by thousands of people. Okay, instruments of the family. All right. So I'm going to just let you look at that really quickly. Long story short, it became standard: violin, viola, cello, bass. Okay, so I kind of already went over that. Woodwinds, unlike the Baroque period, because you remember the Baroque period, it was just strings and harpsichord were like the main instruments and vocal. Woodwinds were not a thing. They finally were able to be a thing. Flute, oboe, bassoon, clarinet, these instruments were finally a part of the orchestra, and during the classical period is when we really developed that. Percussion was also developed. Before the classical period, there was no timpani. Now we obviously had the development of the timpani, which is a pitched percussion instrument, and then you had Turkish instruments, so bass drum, cymbals, triangle, tambourine, etc. All right, and the keyboard instruments were no longer the harpsichord, but the clavichord and piano. And then your brass instruments, you had the bootchen, the French horn, the trumpet, the trombone. I know none of you have seen what the bootchen is. I'm going to show you a picture. It's kind of hilarious. Are you ready? Ready? Look at that. No? No one think that's... I think it's crazy. It's like a weird trombone. Look at that. It has a face.
That's a really strange looking dog.
It's hilarious. Okay. And then composers. We have our composers here. Now, what I'm going to do is I will post this so you can look at links also, but I also, let me see if you can see that there. What I'm going to do is I have a couple of these that I really want to get in a little bit of time that we have left. So, please make sure that you are listening. These pieces are kind of standards of these composers, and I want you to be able to hear even a little bit of them. So here we go. This is Mozart. Actually, no, we'll start with Haydn, because so in sonata or concertos, you always had the orchestra play an intro, kind of like how we have the overture for musicals. They would always play an intro before the actual soloist comes. This one I picked for you trumpets because it's Wynton Marsalis. So Wynton Marsalis won 2 Grammys, one for classical music and one for jazz music. So he completely spanned it, and here you can see why, or hear why. Can you hear it? Okay. Bonus point. Who knows who's the conductor right now? He's super famous.
Is it Haydn?
Haydn?
Yeah.
No, Haydn is the composer, bro. Haydn is from the 1700s.
Thomas, he's dead at this point in the video.
Did anybody see? Look who that is. Look at the face of the conductor. Also, look at his conducting, because I'm going to show you 2 other ones that are also very famous. This one is the most famous that you're going to know. That's Wynton Marsalis. He's an amazing trumpet player, if you don't know. conductor. There it is. Who's that? Did you guys know who that is? Ay. That's John Williams. You should know who that is. John Williams. Okay. So that is the trumpet concerto by Haydn. He was the first one of the classical. Now we're going to listen to the piano concerto. I was going to do the clarinet concerto, but I wanted you to see this next composer or conductor. This is Albert von Karajan. He is the composer who conductor who conducted for the Berlin Philharmonic for 35 years. And you should know this piano concerto too as you listen to it. So just listen to it. So look at how he's conducting. It's very interesting. Very interesting. Like right there, he's like doing the bow movements to like really create. Anyway, it's very interesting. All right, and last one, we're going to Beethoven. This is a piece. So this is Leonard Bernstein, who is a very famous conductor and composer as well. And he conducted the Shostakovich Symphony No. 5, which is my favorite one to listen to. So if you've paid enough attention, you've already seen him before. But here he is doing Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. I obviously didn't do Fur-Elise or Moonlight Sonata. Oh, that's another thing I wanted to tell you guys. So here's the thing. With classical composers and classical music, they actually didn't name it any of these things. They were very articulate in what they did. Like everything was like they made it a catalog. So it was Symphony No. 1, like Opus 32 in B major, and it was just describing the music and the key signature, and it was not like Symphonie Fantastique and the Surprise Symphony and Moonlight Sonata. Like Beethoven and these composers didn't name it anything like that. It was very, very like categorical, and they just made it what they just described it. So anywho, so Symphony No. 9. Here we go. It's amazing. Oh my god, I just love this. If your parents ever listen to like NPR or anything like that, they actually use that Symphony Number 9 in their intro. Bum 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 da 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 da. Anyway, okay, so classical music. Felt very quick, but the reason why I'm going very quickly is because I want to try to get through the rest of it. So next Monday Monday, I do romantic time period, and then on Wednesday we're going to do the modern time period, and we can actually then you'll have at least like knowledge of how our music that we play ever came to be. So tomorrow is your test. It is at 1:30. I already posted the app not the app, but the website that you need to go in order to log on. It's called Go Formative. Okay, you just go to just look at it on Canvas. It tells you exactly how to do it. It gives you the code to join the class, and this is how we're take the test. So you have to make sure that you have it done before tomorrow. Okay. Questions, comments?
Alright, I have one quick question.
Yes.
So you said that like the actual composers did not make like the title of the song like that were used recently, like for example.
Correct.
Okay, so who did make the names?